It's now my honor to introduce another true American visionary. We've actually heard from so many today, even beginning with Denny Washington, started with nothing and built up his company. Elon Musk started with nothing, and look where he is. Sheryl Sandberg has just worked so hard, and look where she is. And there's so many Montana companies where it's the same, started from scratch and just worked at it, lead themselves like Elon has and others have, and they've done quite well. After serving 2 tours with the Marine Corps in Vietnam, our next speaker returned with a great business idea, and he too took a risk. Fred Smith. Fred Smith founded FedEx in 1971. I was down in Memphis just about a week ago, talking with Fred, showing me and all that he's doing, all the planes coming in. It's stunning, especially in the middle of the night. All these planes coming into Memphis and they'll leave again. They exchange packages. They do about 160,000 packages an hour. It's incredible. When FedEx began, it started with nothing, about 24, 25 cities. Today, more than 660 aircraft, 90,000 vehicles, serving 220 countries around the world. The workforce is about 330,000 people. It's all interesting because he had this idea about overnight shipping, and he wrote a paper on it when he was a student at Yale University. He got a C. I thought he got an F, but he only got a C on it. But he believed in himself. He did what he thought would make sense. Since our 2010 summit, FedEx opened a new freight facility. Employs 50 people here in Butte. A few months ago, broke ground at the FedEx ground hub at Billings. That facility will put 130 folks in our state to work. Today, more than 600 people work for FedEx. Please join me in welcoming a great innovator, a great guy, Fred Smith.
Senator, thank you. Thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate that kind introduction. Let me tell you how happy I am to be in Montana for several reasons. Number one, it's one of my favorite states, and as the Senator said, FedEx and our 4 main operating divisions, FedEx Express, FedEx Ground, FedEx Freight, and our FedEx Solutions Group all have operations here, and it's a great state to do business in, and we commit it to anyone. And secondarily, I'm happy to be here because the state is the home to my wife's big sister, who's a retired special needs school teacher from Great Falls, affectionately called by my children Aunt Grizzly. And third, my youngest daughter, Samantha, who works for Google, is up here working this event. Their chairman, who's a wonderful man, is coming in this afternoon, so I get a chance to see Sam before she goes to Australia for 3 months. So I was happy to accept this invitation, I can tell you. Let me also thank Senator Baucus for his service as a United States Senator over these many years. And of course, it takes a lot for a family to put that kind of commitment. All of us are sorry to see him step down from the country's standpoint, but from the standpoint of the Senator and Melanie, they've got a great future ahead of them, and I hope they have more fun in the years to come than you can imagine, because they certainly have earned it, given the tremendous service that they provided the country. As Senator Baucus mentioned, he was down at FedEx watching us move some of those 10 million shipments around the world that our operating companies move. And they had an opportunity to speak to a number of our small customers that we had assembled, because as you know, Senator Baucus and Congressman Camp, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, are trying to reform the United States tax code. And he asked me when he asked that I come up here to give you our thoughts on this, because we are right in the middle of this debate. We're a very large, capital-intensive company, as the Senator mentioned, 650 plus airplanes, the largest purchaser at the moment of Boeing freighters, 777s and 767s, powered by GE engines. We have over 90,000 vehicles, and all of those $4 billion that we'll spend this year in our capital budget will employ tens of thousands of men and women at Boeing and General Electric in Ohio and Freightliner in Washington State, $400 million worth of IT spend, because FedEx is a very large technology company in addition to being a transportation company. And we're very concerned about the status of the United States economy. I give a longer speech where I talk about the three root causes of our slow growth and our inability to produce the kind of high-paying blue-collar jobs that the country became accustomed to in the post-World War II period. And note that there are really three fundamental reasons that we've reached this low growth environment. One is the United States has had a very muscular foreign policy, led the world over these past 50 years, fought for open trading systems, which of course we and our friendly competitors, UPS and others, benefit from. But quite frankly, the United States has been out-traded in most of these agreements. And as a consequence, we suffer a significant and chronic trade deficit, which takes money right out of our GDP. President Obama, of course, has identified a renaissance in manufacturing of one of the key initiatives to restore American prosperity, and we certainly agree with that. But more modern and bilateral agreements that are good for both parties, because after all, we love our shippers, whether they're China and Europe or the United States. We like traffic going both ways, not just one way. Second, the United States over the past 40 years, and remember this is the 40th anniversary of the Arab oil embargo, which took place on October 16th, 1973, has transferred more wealth in these 40 years than any entity in the history of the world. And it's because we have allowed our oil and gas production to decline and have been forced to import our needs. At one time, a few years ago, over 60% of our oil was imported, and it represented about 60% of our trade deficit. Again, dollars flowing out of the United States which aren't recircled and recycled around the United States economy, employing graduates from Montana Tech or the various institutions of higher earning, or our blue-collar folks who clearly are not seeing the type of job creation that the country should expect given the tremendous power of our economy, or at least the potential power of our economy. Fortunately, innovation, entrepreneurship, invention, the things that have been at the heart of American growth and prosperity have been at work in the oil and gas sector, and we've seen this incredible revolution in horizontal drilling and so-called fracking that is providing a renaissance in our oil and gas business. We're now down to a little over 40% of our oil and gas needs having to be imported, and the jobs in the Bakken and down in the Eagle Ford Shale and offshore are producing thousands and tens of thousands of well-paying American jobs and adding to our economies. It's still about 60%, by the way, even with our resurgent production. It's still about 60% of our trade deficit. So as we produce more and more, and at the same time develop alternatives, because you've got to remember oil and gas is a worldwide market. So when the prices go up in one part of the world for oil, they go up everywhere. Canada and Norway, who are net oil exporters saw their prices for fuel go up just like we saw. So in addition to producing all the oil and gas that we can possibly produce, we also need to diversify our transportation sector. And nobody could be a better example of that than Elon Musk. I've been to Tesla. It's fantastic what they're doing. Battery technology is improving. Hybrids are becoming a bigger and bigger part of our transportation scene. We have almost 500 of them at FedEx today. And the new fuel efficiency standards put in by both the Bush and the Obama administration are meaning we're using less oil and an absolute basis, and we're diversifying in terms of electrification of light-duty vehicles, personal and pickup and delivery vehicles, and natural gas for over-the-road vehicles. This afternoon, you'll hear from the President and CEO of FedEx Freight about our demonstration units that we're now operating with CNG and LNG, and we're quite excited about that. But as you can see in the first slide I'm going to put up, despite those good developments in the oil and gas sector, and hopefully a reinvigorated manufacturing sector and more equal trade with our trading partners, particularly China and Japan, the United States is on a long-term trend for lower GDP growth. And this has been going on for a significant period of time. As I mentioned a moment ago, companies like Facebook and Google and FedEx and other entrepreneurial and innovative companies are the engines that produce the growth in our economy. But with that innovation, you have to have coincident investment. And the next chart I put up usually brings gas from people. This is the correlation of business investment in equipment and software and job creation. Now, my application to Montana Tech would not have lasted a nanosecond on the administrator's desk. I was lucky to get out of school as a liberal arts major, and for the record, I was very happy to get that C grade that Senator Baucus mentioned. But as you can see, it almost looks like railroad tracks. Business investment in equipment and software is the primary driver of economic growth and job creation in the United States. We all know from the popular press that our job creation is not even keeping up with population growth. A great majority of the jobs that we are producing are part-time in low value-added professions. We have the lowest labor participation in this country, about 58 or 59%. I think at our zenith we were at about 63%. It's the lowest since 1978. Blue-collar wages, unless you're fortunate enough to be a graduate of Montana Tech and a petroleum engineer and get in trace of this fantastic energy revolution. In general, blue-collar wages are not growing. And there is significant and growing disparity in earnings capabilities in the various segments of our society. Next chart shows it clearly. Underinvestment has been a key factor in our inability to grow our GDP and produce the jobs that we want. You notice in 2009, there's a little uptick there, far below the 8.5% of GDP that we were spending in the early part of this century, but a little uptick. There's just no doubt about the fact that the big reason that that took place was the Congress and the Obama administration put in investment incentives on a temporary basis, so-called bonus depreciation. It allowed you to write off the value of your investment for tax purposes on the year that it was made, rather than stringing out the depreciation over a number of years and having to pay taxes on the earnings. It's just a delay, kind of like the credit card company letting you have an extra month. You got to pay the piper, though. But in my mind, the most important thing that took place that led us out of the Great Recession were those investment incentives. Probably more important than the other two charts are the one I'm going to put up now. It shows the capital investment that we are making in the main is replacement capital. It's just for things wearing out. We're not putting in place the type of investment we need for future growth. Now, everybody knows the story about the two teenagers, and grandmother gives both of them $100. One of them goes out and gets a lawnmower, and every week from that point forward can earn enough money to buy himself some beer. The other grandson goes out, spends it all that weekend on beer, no lawnmower. The difference between capital investment and consumption is pretty clear to the American public. A lot of people try to make it arcane. It's very straightforward. You also have to see in the next slide the same thing is taking place in our public infrastructure. We're not investing enough in our highways, our bridges, our airports, and we're now at the lowest level of public investment that this country has seen since the end of World War II. And as the next slide shows, there's declining net government investment. So again, we are barely replenishing what we have. The tax system in the United States is broken. It incents financialization, leverage, private equity, speculation, excessive debt, and discourages investment in manufacturing, big service companies like FedEx and UPS, and all the other entities that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Our tax rate is the highest of any industrialized country in the world. We're one of two countries that taxes on a worldwide basis instead of on a so-called territorial basis, the other being Chile, who has a tax rate of 20% versus our 35%. So if the people in this audience and the people of Montana and the people of the United States want to invigorate the American economy, it's a very straightforward path to do so. And it's get in train with your Senator Baucus and reform our tax code so it gets America back to business in those types of sectors and employ the blue-collar workers and the middle-income Americans that have been so disadvantaged by the tax codes that we currently have. Thank you very much. I'm supposed to take one or two questions. I don't want to keep anybody from lunch, particularly not in Montana. You probably got some good beef up here. All right, I'll repeat it. Our reported revenues were about 42 billion, 43, something like that.
Is that worldwide in all FedEx businesses?
Yes, that's worldwide. This year there'll be someplace between 45 and 46 billion. The question was, where do we account for the $11 billion that we get from the Postal Service? I wish we got $11 billion every year for the Postal Service. We provide the wholesale transportation through our daytime air network of the USPS's Priority Mail. And that's about $1 billion a year, a little over. So the 7-year contract is worth $11 billion. It's just in revenue. It's listed in other freight. We also have a service called Smart Post, where we provide the technology, the pickup, the sortation, transportation, and delivery of lightweight residential packages, and then insert them in the destination postal service, and that's called Smart Post. And that's a very high-growing business too, and that's roughly $1 billion business. Well, I don't want to. I'm afraid he's going to get after it. I'll answer it after if you want. Yeah.
Very persuasive and convincing. My question is, in addition to tax code and changing that, are there other factors you believe that have caused the lack of investment, or what other changes could we take place besides just going after the tax code?
Well, today the vast majority of equities in the United States are owned by tax-free institutions, mostly pension funds. And every pension fund is trying to get the maximum amount of return so they can pay their pensions, and the people that run those pension funds will fire the managers that don't produce the highest returns. So there is a huge prejudice in the tax codes for things that tend to be not capital intensive, to private equity and hedge funds, because with a tax rate of 35%, that 35% is in essence sheltered by the US government because you can deduct the interest against the leverage. And these private equity folks have a significant disincentive to capital investment. So there are lots of factors, but that's just one of them.
Can we have another question?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much for being here today. My question has to do with how you reconcile the need to overhaul our tax code with the deficit we have in public infrastructure.
Well, we at FedEx have supported a fuel tax, a gasoline tax, which has been allowed to atrophy since the middle part of the 1990s, as long as that fuel tax is spent on infrastructure. And that was a method that was proven for many, many years. It's been the lack of a political will to increase those monies which have allowed the public infrastructure investment to go down. So we should go back to having user pays, and we burn, I think, someplace between 1.6 billion and 1.7 billion gallons per year. So for us to say we support a fuel tax, you must understand this is a pretty serious public policy issue from our perspective, but that's how I would deal with that particular issue.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith, perhaps one more question.
Okay.
All right, so I have one question specific. You said that there's a lot of income inequality and things are contributing down to an economy that is just not spurring itself up. So if we could do one thing as a country, everybody here today, if they could just do one thing to help boost the economy, what would it be?
Well, the genius of the private enterprise system is that transactions for goods and services take place without any government entity telling you to do something or keeping you from doing it. If you decide today that you want to get a cup of coffee from Starbucks, walk in there and get a cup of coffee. It's a private transaction. If you decide you need to ship something from here to Miami, you can deal with us and we're happy to take place on it. So the important thing is to increase the wealth of the country. And the tax code that we have today enriches certain elements, particularly the people that are up in the symbol economy, the financial folks. And in the blue-collar economy, we have 330,000 folks that work for FedEx. My guess is 25,000 of them are white-collar folks. The rest of them are blue-collar folks. And the only way you make a blue-collar worker more efficient and are able to earn more is the public and private investment in the capital equipment and infrastructure and in the education you give that person. So as those charts I showed you, we have been eating our seed corn. We've been drinking the beer rather than buying the lawnmower. And it's a relatively straightforward thing. We could talk for a long time why that's the case. It's basically because of the Tax Act that was enacted in '86, which equalized personal and corporate rates. It sounds wonderful, but the people that are actually making those capital investments that produce those jobs are the big companies and the so-called gazelles, the ones that are coming up. So you have to get rid of all these special deals and either go to a much lower tax rate where we have investment opportunities here rather than people investing in Chile or Brazil or India, and go to a modified territorial system that ends a lot of this parking intellectual property in a double tax-free place, And if you did that, I have no doubt at all that investment would go up, GDP would go up, and as the charts show, they are perfectly correlated with blue-collar job creation, particularly high-wage blue-collar job creation.
Great job.
Okay.